What is ours and what is not? What ideas wandered their way into computer science and what did we invent? These are the questions that form the basis for today's episode of Errant Hashtag, which is called the Voracious Discipline. It's probably bad form to make your colleagues the subjects of your research, and it's perhaps a bad career decision as well. Research creates a clear division between the observer and the observed. In a brief moment, you go from being an equal colleague to being a detached scholar. You retreat into your own world and lose all of your collegial connections to the field. Yet, a systematic study of computer science research might help us understand how such research operates and how computer science both borrows from other fields and contributes to those fields. Computing, over its history, has proven to be a voracious discipline and seems to have plundered much of humankind's intellectual endeavors. At its inception, it borrowed concepts from biology to describe the basic model of computation, and it took terms from industrial engineering to describe the process of programming. By the end of the 1950s, the field had already taken ideas from mathematics, statistics, economics, linguistics, management, as well as electrical engineering. In my own small corner of computing, I've had several opportunities to see how computing research appropriates new ideas. During the formative period of this little field, which lasted roughly from 2008 to 2012, I watched researchers borrow ideas from others without knowing what they were taking. One individual took an experimental design from psychology and used it to test a theory that was decidedly non-psychological. A second adopted a model from industrial management without recognizing the differences between what he was doing and the problem that the model originally solved. A third used a market model without recognizing some of the basic issues with supply and demand curves. In the end, all these individuals contributed to this little field, but none of them received the full benefits of a real collaboration with researchers from another area. If we're not able to study our ways of appropriating ideas, we can at least get some idea of how we work by looking at our literature. If we are a field that merely borrows from other fields, we might expect that the motion of our literature would be inward. Researchers might begin their work by citing and quoting the literature of some other field, but eventually these authors would acquire what they needed from those others and return to the computing literature. After a time, they would get most of their ideas from computing journals and conferences, and they would ultimately publish their own results in the same places. Obviously, a full study of such a phenomenon would require a great deal of data, a contentious debate over the ACM-IEEE computing typology, and a complex stochastic model. However, we can get a quick picture of how computer scientists conduct interdisciplinary research by analyzing the bibliographies and survey articles on common subjects. Such articles are not as plentiful as I might like, but I stumble across them regularly enough so that I take the time to do a few simple comparisons. This week, for example, I found a pair of survey articles written only 3 years apart on image processing. In a couple of hours of computation, I saw a pattern that I've come to expect. The first survey, written in the early days of that field, listed many articles from journals outside of the computing field. Articles on optics, biology, television engineering, mathematics, communications, cartography. The second survey, which came a mere 3 years after the first, cited many of the same fields, but it had a much smaller fraction of references in fields outside computing. In the first survey, 16% of the bibliography came from IEEE Computer Society or ACM publications. In the second, that figure had risen to 22%. In addition, a full quarter of the references came from new books that were published on the field of image processing. Two survey articles, of course, do not fully establish any theory, much less a theory about computing research as a whole. However, they do seem to support a strategy that we innately feel. When we start our research, we're grateful for any publication, including publications in journals that are not our own. After we have established our work, we try to produce an article for a major periodical in our discipline. We want the approval of our peers, of our institutions, of the people who are around us. As we move forward, we look to create a conference or a journal of our own. This is the story that I've heard at research conferences large and small. Such a story suggests that we are more willing to distance ourselves from the sources of our ideas and see some value in distancing ourselves from our colleagues. This is David Allen Greer for the Errant Hashtag. Take care.